Alright, so these are just quick tips based on what I learned or relearned when I started driving Oulton Park again this season, or this week. And basically I'll just go through and point out some things that I observed, things that I normally do on this track, that kind of thing. Nothing too in-depth. So let's head over turn one. So, getting on the brakes around here. I usually like to try to rotate the car quite a lot on the entry here. And one thing I always forget when coming to this track is how much you can use, how much of the grass you can use on the inside of the corner at the apex. So, heading into here, you can see I get back on the throttle here, so I braked it a little bit early on this lap. And as I mentioned, usually I like to get it a little bit sideways on the entry. This time I didn't get that done, so it's maybe 400ths off an ideal optimal lap. But getting plenty of track there on the inside, then having to be a bit patient with the throttle this time around. Alright, and now for turn 3, probably one of my favorite corners on this track. You'll notice one very important thing here is that I put a little bit of steering input towards the left before I actually got on the brakes. So I just wanted to get a little bit of that load transfer going, and also a little bit of that rotation towards the corner before getting on the brakes. Because otherwise, basically you're forced to brake a little bit earlier. You need to straight line your braking zone a little bit, and that means you have to be a bit more gentle with the turn-in as well, because we're going down on the dip here just as we brake. So if you're trying to put a lot of input in after that, then it upsets the balance really easily. And another important thing about this corner is the banking. It's considerably more banked on the very inside of the corner, which is why you want to get to the inside. You can't really go for a late turn-in, which is a common mistake. And then you end up sliding around through the whole corner. So that's about as inside as we want to get. That was a bit more sideways than I'd like it to normally go. I was lucky that time to be able to catch it quickly. And then back on the throttle, use the banking, and you'll keep from getting that 1x on the exit. Alright, for the hairpin here, I just went on top of that little white patch. Early in the week here, I was braking always a little bit too early, and then you get in a struggle with wanting to get back on the throttle but not being able to yet because you don't have any rotation done. So I've moved my braking later and later here, and in general it's better to brake too late than even a little bit too early. If you brake a little bit late, all that happens is you miss the apex a little bit, take a slightly later turn in, and you can get an even better exit down for the long straight. So no biggie braking a little bit too late here, as long as you don't try to force the issue and get back to the apex. And you notice here as well, I still have a tiny bit of brake on, and that's intentional. It's just to keep the rotation going. And basically you want to feel with the front tires that you're using grip rather than sliding them across the surface. So you need to be patient putting steering lock on. And on the exit here, it depends a lot on exactly how the entry was. But most of the time you want to be a little bit gentle getting onto the throttle. I think on this lap I'm able to do it fairly quickly. So I was able to get a lot of rotation done here. And just a note here about this running wide here. If you haven't got a lot of rotation done and you're not able to keep unwinding the wheel here, then it'll upset the car a little bit. So this is just about on the limit of how much steering you want to have when you go over this bump. Alright, now this one was interesting. Early in the week I kept turning too late for, I think it's turn 5. So turning a little bit too late, and then most of the time just sliding around and being forced to wait to get on the throttle, losing lots of time and being really inconsistent as well. On this lap I took it slightly cautiously, braking just a meter or two earlier than I'd want to, but it works out fine. I think it's only a 100th or 2 off the optimal. You can just basically see that I braked a bit too early because I had to get off the throttle a little bit on the exit after getting on the throttle around the apex. And on this lap I take a fair bit on the inside, some grass near the apex, which was probably fairly close to 1x, but luckily not on this lap. Alright, and just a note here, on the previous straight as well, I shifted up to 5th. Some people, or I think most drivers, will keep it in 4th. And same thing goes here, so now I'm shifting up to 5th. A lot of drivers will keep it in 4th and maybe hit the rev limiter for a little bit. I prefer not to. There's a few reasons for that. I know Okayama is another track where I shift up a gear higher than most people. And reason one is to avoid blowing up engines. So if you do it in your normal time trials or practices, then it's no issue doing it in the race, and it won't mess up your flow. And so when you're in a draft, of course, then ideally you'd want to be shifting up even in these places, which would be different from your normal thing if you don't normally shift up. And then another big reason is, in this corner, for example, if you're on 4th, you'll be bouncing off the rev limiter as you're approaching your braking point, and that just makes it a little bit unpredictable with the load transfer. So if you are coming back from hitting the rev limiter, then the load will be going in a different direction versus if you have some power on. So it can just make it a bit unpredictable, a little bit less consistent. This lap's similar to the previous one. I just brake a tiny bit early, tiny bit cautious, so through the corner I'm forced to modulate it, change it a little bit with the throttle. I have to pump on and off the gas a few times. Although just know here that it is, in general, much better to brake a little bit too early here than a tiny bit too late. A little bit too late and you can easily be drifting through the corner. And this final corner is fun. There's a few different ways, or several different ways you can take it. I don't really mind varying my braking points a little bit because it just makes it interesting. Driving a little bit differently. If you brake a little bit too late, you just take a slightly later turn in, and it grips up nicely because there's a bit of a dip in the track on the elevation. And then on the exit as well, there's a nice crest because the track goes back up and then down, and that's right when you're getting on the throttle. So quite often you have to be fairly careful getting on the throttle. Unless on this lap, I think I have it somewhere around 80 or 90% for a little bit before getting back onto full throttle. Okay, I hope there's something useful there. I'm gonna go back to the beginning of the replay and just play through the lap.